Michael Mott.
Zachary Hale.
Feel like it's been a minute.
It's been a minute. Yeah.
We recorded like a bunch of episodes.
I know.
And then you went on your Arkansas hiatus.
Yes, yeah. But I was at work. I was working.
That's right.
For the pod.
That's
in,
right.
In Arkansas.
Right.
Got a couple episodes recorded.
That's right. We got a couple shout out to Brian. I have not listened to the episodes, but I'm sure they are like awesome.
Yeah, so we'll see those, I think the first and second Thursday of July, if I'm counting right, which this episode is going to be towards the end of June. So it won't be, for the listener, it won't be that far, but we're recording this at the kind of middle of June.
Well, this happened, this idea came, like, this was a popular trend maybe a couple months ago. Did you see people like ask AI or ChatGPT to like roast a family picture of them? I
did see this, and we actually submitted a picture.
Did you? Yeah.
But he didn't do very well.
Come on, Chat.
I don't know. I wasn't pleased with it. It was just like, nah.
Well, I'll let you be the judge. I had a conversation, said, hey, you know Take Two Theology? And they're like, yeah. I was like, can you roast Take Two Theology?
Okay.
And so I got a ChatGPT roast.
All right. Did you have to give it stuff, or you just pulled it from the interwebs?
I should pull up the conversation. I was like, I was like, hey, do you know Take Two Theology? Yeah. And it's like, yes. I was like, tell me the host. I said like Michael and Zach. Tell me a little, and it would like pull. And I was like, what's some of the episodes? So it was like interacting with the right
cool
podcast. And then I was like, let's give a roast. And so this is what ChatGPT had. It's a Take Two Theology, because apparently the first take just wasn't biblical enough. The only podcast where two grown men sit down, hit record, and try to out-Calvin each other for 30 minutes straight. Michael and Zach sound like the kind of guys who would cancel a beach trip because, quote, Ecclesiastes just hits different this week. These dudes are so reformed, I'm surprised they don't pre-select who gets to listen to the podcast. Zach has the chill, measured tone of a guy who's been asked, what's the deal with predestination one too many times by a youth group kid named Tyler? And Michael, he brings the kind of energy that says, I highlighted 5 commentaries just to dunk on your eschatology. Their hot takes are so reformed, they make John Piper looks like he's experimenting with progressive jazz. Honestly, the most controversial thing about the show is which host sighs louder when someone brings up the Nephilim. and don't get me started on how they treat dispensationalism like it's a theological rash nobody wants to admit they had in college.
Hey, I'm a dispensationalist.
Yeah, maybe he was thinking strict versus
progressive dispensationalist.
It's clarify. The podcast equivalent of a seminary class you didn't register for, but ended up enjoying anyway, mostly because they occasionally throw shade at prosperity preachers like it's a sport.
Nice.
Take Two Theology, because nothing says fun like parsing Greek verb tenses over lo-fi background music and the crushing weight of doctrinal precision.
Pretty good, Chat.
I was pretty pumped.
Yeah.
In Chat's defense too, I primed it a little bit. It gave me one that was not
funny.
It was not funny. And I was like, you need to make this like spicier, like not mean, but like a little bit more. And then it was like gold.
That's good. That's
so
good. That's
anyway, perfect. That is Chat's roast of the Take Two podcast, which I was actually impressed that it could pull. It was like pulling. I guess there's transcripts on YouTube and stuff. It can pull like the John Piper and some of these words and stuff.
Yeah, and we give pretty good. I've actually been using Chat, although I don't think Chat can talk to Chat. Like for our descriptions, I just give it all of our notes and say, come up with a description. I'll read through it.
Oh yeah.
But most of the time, it's like, yep, you nailed it. That's fine, and I put that in there, which is a little bit more detailed than what I did at the very beginning, because it was like a sentence for me. So I'm like,
you can't be like, Well, that's good. So I was reading that the first time, I was like dying laughing. So anyway,
very nice. Nice.
I think it's a good setup for a 5 or 6 episode series on Ezra and Nehemiah.
That's right.
Yeah. Any I guess we can maybe on a separate podcast we'll get into your Arkansas.
Yeah, we can talk about some Arkansas stuff. That'd be good. Yeah,
it's great. Well, let's jump into Ezra and Nehemiah, episode 2. Let's take it to the next level. From the heart of the Low Country in South Carolina,
it's the Take Two podcast, where we take theology to the next level.
Ezra, chapter 1. We're going to start today. Maybe we can give like a 30 seconds recap.
Yeah.
Like the first episode, we just kind of set the stage.
Yeah, and since that time, I have read through Ezra and Nehemiah and watched the Bible Project video on it.
Yeah, it's good.
Because, I don't know if you remember, but I had said that Ezra was the one who was the cupbearer But it was Nehemiah. I went back because I don't know how I got those confused, but yeah. What I did not realize is that the beginning is basically talking about Zerubbabel. That's how we've always pronounced it.
Yeah.
But they pronounce it, the Bible guys pronounce it a little bit different.
Man. Yeah, it doesn't start with Ezra or Nehemiah. It's like 50 or 70 years before that.
Yeah, that's what, I didn't realize it was a time gap like that. But
It's So, a couple notes I wrote down. Ezra, Nehemiah, it's really one scroll in the Hebrew Bible, spans about 100 years, written by one author, likely Ezra. And I think that the main idea is we're going to see there's 3 parallel movements, at least some people maybe say even more, where these are all together for a reason. The author is driving home a point, and we'll see this in today's podcast, but each kind of section has a king, a different main character with a different mission, and then maybe some opposition they run into, and then kind of mixed results, maybe some good, some bad, but it is kind of weird because you think great leader, and not saying they weren't good leaders, Ezra and Nehemiah, but it really does show you that men can do a lot, but can't do everything.
Right, yeah.
And you need the Spirit of God to work, or really you can't expect a ton. I just have notes from when we were going over this in Impact. A lot of this is just text. Some of this stuff you'll see, Michael, as we're working our way through. I bolded some places maybe we should spend some time on, and then other places, especially when Ezra and Nehemiah is a great test of pronunciation. We'll skip over a lot of these names.
Oh, my goodness. So I told you I read through it. I did most of that reading, quote unquote, using Dwell.
Nice.
And, if you're reading those long chapters of names, you can kind of like scan, and it's like son of, son of, son of, son of. But when you listen to someone have to go through all of those, like Bebi is one of them that you hear over and over again. There's also, I wonder how far back these go. We'll probably get into it. But Uzzah is named in the list. Is that the Uzzah who reached out and touched the ark?
Man, so interesting. Yeah, I wonder. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, that is good.
He was in the priestly line.
And it's one of those things, we're going to see this. One of the joys, like what I love about Ezra and Nehemiah is it's, in the Jewish scriptures at the end of the Old Testament, right before Chronicles, and it really is a conglomeration of all of these Old Testament texts, like Ezra, the scribe. We'll talk about him next time. But he's, kind of the poster boy for scribes and, what people wanted to be, even though it went wrong. But because he was so masterful at weaving all of these things together. So much, I think, of the Old Testament, you can't just walk in and know nothing. You can, but you're going to miss so much. We'll kind of catch that even here. So we're going to start at the very beginning. Ezra, chapter 1. The goal today maybe is to cover the first 6 chapters.
And do I need to be ready to hit any of these Jeremiah or Daniel
passages?
Actually,
that would be great if you started getting some of those passages together. And while you're turning there, I'll start reading Ezra 1, chapter 1. And it begins in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia. The word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled. The Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and also put in it writing. Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord God of heaven has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Even in those first 2 verses, we see, Cyrus is mentioned. Not the first time Cyrus is mentioned in the Bible. We see Jeremiah mentioned. Most people are like, okay, I know Jeremiah. Talks about Jeremiah, what he said would be fulfilled. So, Michael, if you want to read Jeremiah 25:11.
It says, "This whole land will be a desolation and a horror, and these nations will serve the king of Babylon 70 years." Okay,
so, this prophecy of 70 years of exile, that's in Jeremiah. Jews would have been, somewhat familiar at this time with it and these things. So, Jeremiah 29:10.
For thus says the Lord, when 70 years have been completed for Babylon, I will visit you and fulfill my good word to you and to bring you back to this place.
Nice. So it's not just even one time in Jeremiah, it's kind of spread throughout. Are you able to grab Daniel 9:1-2?
I've done so many sword drills, what I'm saying?
You've been preparing your whole life.
That's right. In the first year of the king Darius, or Darius.
Yeah, nice.
Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, of Median descent, who was made king over the kingdom of the Chaldeans. In the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, observed in the books the number of the years which was revealed as the word to the Lord to Jeremiah the prophet for the completion of the desolation of Jerusalem, namely 70 years.
So we know people were talking about it. Daniel was aware of it. Daniel's not an insignificant figure in Judah's history. So this is what's going on. Cyrus has kind of come to be king. And then you're probably, if you're listening, you're like, man, what's like the one of the major texts that people know about Jeremiah is Jeremiah 31:31. So as Michael reads this, I think this is good. This is the kind of stuff people probably are thinking, especially once Cyrus decrees you can build stuff. They're probably like, okay, 70 years is up. And they're probably like, oh, this is what Jeremiah was talking about. Go ahead.
Behold, days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not like the covenant which I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. My covenant which they broke, although I was a husband to them, declares the Lord. I don't know how much you want me to read, but goes on to flesh out more than the covenant.
I think most of us have heard this, and it's just interesting. Like, to us, it makes a lot of sense. We think of the new covenant. If you were a Jew in this time, and you're like, okay, we served our time in exile. God's going to work with us again. It's probably a very exciting time. We're going to like rebuild our city. This is awesome. A couple other places we want to turn. Are you turning to Isaiah?
I'm already there.
He's already there. Isaiah 44, 24, and 28.
Says, thus says the Lord, your Redeemer, and the one who formed you from the womb, and I, the Lord, am the maker of all things, stretching out the heavens by myself and spreading out the earth all alone. And then skip down to 28.
Yes.
It is I who says of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and he will perform all my desire. And he declares of Jerusalem, she will be built, and of the temple, your foundation will be laid.
Pretty amazing.
Pretty crazy.
By name, Cyrus is mentioned hundreds of years before. I don't know, 300-400 years before maybe, when Isaiah was written, that this prophecy is like pretty on the money. That's Jerusalem, we're going to build the temple, build the foundation. So they see all this stuff coming together. Pretty amazing. Let's look at just a little bit later, chapter 45 of Isaiah, verses 1 and 4.
Thus says the Lord to Cyrus, his anointed, whom I have taken by the right hand to subdue nations before him, and to loose the loins of kings, to open doors before him, so that the gates will not be shut. And then skip down to verse 4.
Yes.
For the sake of Jacob, my servant, and Israel, my chosen one, I have also called you by your name. I have given you a title of honor, though you have not known me. I am the Lord, and there is no other. Besides me, there is no God. I will gird you, though you have not known me.
All of this is amazing. And I think a theme that you're going to see in Ezra and Nehemiah is God's sovereignty. We see here, God is sovereign. Even if someone who does not acknowledge God, God is going to use. We saw in the first two verses that, the Lord stirred up the Spirit. He's going to stir up the people. This is common language that we see. And, if we're doing a little bit of history, the Persians did things a little bit different from the Babylonians. Mm-hmm. And not that Cyrus had, the best motives. He was trying to, everyone need to worship their God. We want to make it good. He wants to get all the favor from all the different gods. But seeing how Yahweh orchestrated all of this just to set the stage. You can just imagine, people that are familiar, Jews of the day, they're just going to be pumped.
And I noticed when Cyrus I believe it's Cyrus who's referring to Yahweh, he calls him the God of the heavens, which in my mind, I think Baal had a certain domain and stuff. So he's probably I want to honor, this God of the heavens. So it doesn't necessarily mean he's a monist. Yeah.
That's a good point. It's was endorsing gods of all sorts, and you go, it seems like it was better to have different people groups, and they could tax them heavy, and they could all ask favor of their God. So that's the opening 2 verses. We'll start to move a little bit faster, but we're going to get introduced very soon.
You don't want to spend like 10 minutes for every 2 verses.
This is going to be like a 25-part series. We get introduced to the main character of this section. Michael kind of alluded that it's not Ezra, it's not Nehemiah. Chapter 2 of Ezra has 70 verses. And, buckle up if you're, listening to everything here. But we get introduced to Zerubbabel, and we also Jeshua. And they take a bunch of people back to Jerusalem on this journey. What I was reading, 3 to 4 months to make this journey. But when you look at the lineage of Zerubbabel, descendant of David, descendant of Jehoiachin, the king taken captive in 597, and then Joshua is the last, relatively the last high priest pre-exile. So they've got descendant of David, they got someone in the priestly line, they got 42,000 people plus traveling just all across the desert, all across everywhere, getting back to Jerusalem after 70 years. I thought this was interesting. I don't know if you have Ezra on right there.
Yeah.
Can you read chapter 2, verse 62?
These searched among their ancestral registration, but they could not be located. Therefore, they were considered unclean and excluded from the priesthood. Is that what you're looking for?
No, it was not what I was looking for. Read verse 63.
63.
I typed it wrong.
The governor said to them that they should not eat from the most holy things until a priest stood up with Urim and Thummim.
My understanding is this is the last time we read
those
a
words
bit in the Old Testament, and then they're lost or whatever.
Yeah. So I hope don't want to steal a thunder, but
good.
we're going to have the temple dedicated here.
Yeah.
Are we getting that far in this?
We will.
episode?
Yeah, at least the altar. I think the temple. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And from what I can understand, there's no smoke or anything that comes down. Is that true?
I think you're right. Yeah.
And we have on record people coming in and defiling this temple, and they're not struck dead. Right?
Yeah. Right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
So there's a sense in which I think that when the Babylonians came in and plundered the temple, that whatever presence God had there was not restored here. And so then I also wonder, was he sovereignly, I know in one sense he's sovereign over all dice throws. But is he sovereign such that he's making sure that these dice throws are accurately weeding out those who are of the lineage and are not lineage here?
Yeah, it's interesting because we don't hear anything after this. You would think maybe they would consult these again, if it was working for them.
Right. Or maybe there are 2 brothers and they roll the dice for one of them and one of them says yes, one of them says no, and they're like, God must not be in the Urim and the Thummim anymore. And then, I like that because that's kind of what's going to happen. Things aren't going to turn out how they really want. Something I do want to point out, I did not put this in the notes, but I was reading some information, some commentaries about this. There is, talking about Ezra and his masterful or skillful composition of this, you read through these first 6 chapters, and I guess in the other movements too, you get undertones of the Exodus. We didn't read it, but it's all of their neighbors gave them gold and silver. It's kind of they plundered the Egyptians, they were told to go home with all of this stuff. Some of the language in Hebrew is kind of the same. There's a lot of allusions as well to the promised land we'll see in a little bit. So you can kind of see this build up. They're so excited, and I think it's just setting the stage of the drama of what's about to unfold. So that's really chapters 1 and 2. We did not read everything because there are just a lot of names. The sons of Zatu, the sons of Zakai, the sons of Bani, the sons of Baby.
Cool.
It just keeps going
everywhere. And as you continue to read, the names will continue to happen, and I think that goes to the historicity. This was a historical account that people could fact check.
Right.
People could read this and be like, wait a second, was that really? You know what I mean?
And especially if Ezra is trying to reestablish what they had back when they knew, here is Aaron and his sons and the Kohathites and all the different tribes.
That's right.
He's trying to you probably have to have some type of census in order to go back to that.
That's a great point. You lose like all credibility if you're just pulling people willy-nilly. So we're going to move to chapter 3, and we're going to see rebuilding going on. First, we'll see rebuilding of the altar, and then rebuilding of the temple. But you kind of see as they're, building things first, what they first bring all these structures, these rhythms. They're like, hey, Feast of Booths, let's do this again. We haven't done this for a long time.
Yeah.
Let's, do some offerings at the new moon. Let's give money. And a lot of this, again, is going to remind them of Egypt. Like, they're going to start doing these, in the Exodus, all these different feasts. They're going to start giving free will offerings for the tabernacle. They're giving free will offerings for the altar and the temple. And we see all of these kind of parallels. Built the altar, knew they needed to build the temple, but kind of doing one thing at a time. And then they do build the temple. Zerubbabel laid the foundation of the temple in their second year back. And so really they get after it pretty quickly. They get back, they start building these things. But that's where things kind of change a little bit.
Right, yeah.
So I don't know if you want to read Ezra 3, verses 10 through 13.
Sure. Now when the builders had laid the foundation of the temple of the Lord, the priests stood in their apparel with trumpets, and the Levites, the sons of Asaph, with cymbals, to praise the Lord according to the directions of King David of Israel. They sang, praising and giving thanks to the Lord, saying, for he is good, for his loving kindness is upon Israel forever. And all the people shouted with a great shout when they praised the Lord, because the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid. Yet many of the priests and Levites and heads of the fathers' households, the old men who had seen the first temple, wept with a loud voice when the foundation of this house was laid before their eyes, while many shouted aloud for joy, so that the people could not distinguish the sound of the shout of joy from the sound of the weeping of the people. For the people shouted with a loud shout, and the sound was heard far away.
Yeah, great example of this mixed results. Like they just did, 40,000 people made it back. They built the altar, they laid the foundation for the temple. And you even see this callback for he is good, his steadfast love endures forever. That's like, if you don't know anything about the Bible, you probably recognize that. It's like kind of drawing on this biblical tradition. And then people are crying in the same place where you can't even tell the difference. Who's crying? Who's shouting for joy? Kind of a weird scene, when you think about all of this fanfare. And then
I'm preaching in a couple weeks, and I'm getting motivated. This should be my text. I should preach from it, because I think it's got a lot of ramifications for us today.
Oh, it's great. This is honestly, it's probably one of my favorite things I ever taught through with just the Ezra Nehemiah, because it was all of this stuff. It's like not today, but it is today in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
It's like right there, so good. Now we hit some opposition problems start to arise. We see some adversaries oppose some of the rebuilding. So we're going to start in Ezra 4. Michael, again, if you want to read the first maybe 3 verses.
3 verses. Now, when the enemies of Judah and Benjamin heard that the people of the exile were building a temple to the Lord God of Israel, they approached Zerubbabel and the heads of fathers' households and said to them, let us build with you, for we, like you, seek your God, and we have been sacrificing to him since the days of... This is why you wanted to read it for this verse.
Gotcha.
For the days of Esarhaddon, king of Assyria, who brought us up here. But Zerubbabel and Jeshua and the rest of the heads of the fathers' households of Israel said to them, you have nothing in common with us in building a house to our God, but we ourselves will together build to the Lord God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, has commanded us.
Kind of interesting, if you're just reading this at face value, the text opens up saying these are enemies, these are adversaries. But they don't seem very mean. They seem like nice adversaries. Like, hey, let's build this temple.
Yeah.
They're actually living in the same area.
Yeah.
What's the big deal? But Zerubbabel, Jeshua, and all these people are like, no, have nothing to do with us. Get out of here. Weird? Not weird?
Yeah.
What's your take?
I think, I think there's wisdom in saying these people are not aligned with us, and they shouldn't be present with us at our worship, and we're not going to get pulled aside and distracted by people who don't actually hold the same values as we do.
And it's one of those things, you're going to see this theme repeated kind of in each movement too, where it might be a judgment call, but you've got to make some of these hardline decisions. And like you were saying, you got to build this credibility. This came from the line of Judah. You're trying to build this. And, a lot of people would point to this and say, this is kind of, the start of the Samaritans maybe here. You know what I mean? With the interbreeding. So this is like weird. You go to the New Testament, they can trace it all the way back to here. I mean, even before that with the, Assyrians and that kind of thing. But it's like, that's like already brewing way back here. And you can kind of see some of that most likely at play a little bit.
Yeah. And maybe we have. I'd have to go back and read the end of 2 Kings or end of 2 Samuel and beginning of Kings. I don't know if we have a record of who built the temple. But we know that it was Levites who built the tabernacle, because they brought all those materials to them and the gold and stuff. And they finally stop bringing us bronze or whatever. Yeah. We got too much stuff. But I wonder if that's part of what's in the back of their mind. Like, no, you're not set apart. Like even your average Israelites not helping out, and definitely not someone who stayed around and didn't go into captivity and stay pure like we did. Yeah,
I think that makes a lot of sense. And so if you're kind of tracking with Ezra, there's probably a lot underneath this too we don't know. He labels them as adversaries. If you go to verse 4, he says, then the people of the land discouraged the people of Judah. Their kind of true colors came out where they weren't so friendly anymore. They made them afraid to build. They bribed counselors against them to frustrate their purpose. All the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even until the reign of Darius, king of Persia. So you can see their true colors. And it wasn't like they did this for 6 months. They were probably doing this for 15 to 16 years, like almost 20 years of trying to frustrate and...
Well, that's not good.
And no, not good. Things get a little bit tricky here. Ezra 4, 6 through 23. It's a great example of, ancient writers. And you kind of get... I think you read a lot of the Old Testament in particular, a lot of the Bible. There's a lot of questions that don't get answered. You're like, oh man, I wish it was more explicit. Like, why was Cain's offering rejected? We don't get like that explicit answer. You can like maybe draw some conclusions, or it's like, you look at King Saul and the Amalekites, and it's like he's in trouble because he didn't commit genocide. It's like, well, some people they struggle with that part, but you're missing the point.
Why was Michael the best angel? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you got all these questions we've all thought about. And here, Ezra, his main emphasis is not this linear chronology, but it's thematic. He's trying to paint a picture. And so this part is kind of confusing if you're reading along because it jumps way into the future, like 50, 70 years in the future. It talks about different kings. You're like, wait, I thought it was Cyrus. Now we're talking about all these different kings.
Yeah.
So just to be aware, if you want to, you can even read verse 6. You can kind of see it's like the shifts.
Yeah. Now in the reign of Ahasuerus, in the beginning of his reign, they wrote an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem. And in the days of Artaxerxes, Bishlam, and the rest of his colleagues, this king of Persia, the text of the letter was written in Aramaic and translated from Aramaic. So it's like it jumps two different kingships there.
It's almost like it's like flash forwarding in a movie just to show you like the main ideas. And I didn't take a deep enough dive in this, but people will say again, going back to Ezra crafting this, the first movement, chapters 1 through 6, like start with an edict. We'll get to chapter 6, it ends with an edict, almost precisely to the word. Like half of it's like in Hebrew, half of it's in Aramaic. It's almost like he's like, it's I don't know if it's a chiasm, but it's very symmetrical, where he's just really trying to prove a point. So we're not going to read verses 7 through 16. I'll summarize really quick. We get the names of leaders of the adversaries that are against these Jews. They write a king to Artaxerxes saying, the Jews are building a wicked city, the walls. They're not going to pay their taxes. It's going to hurt the royal revenue. Look at their history. In the past, they've kind of revolted against people. Just read, some of their scriptures. If this city gets built, it's not going to be good for the Persian Empire. We're trying to help you out, king. And so in verse 17 through 23, the king is looking into everything and says, hey, they've got a point. Judah has rebelled in the past, and that they crown their own kings, that they pay taxes to. And so that causes a wrench in things. And then verse 24 kind of draws us back into the chronology of Zerubbabel. So all the work basically has to stop. Verse 24 says, "Then the work of the house of God that is in Jerusalem stopped, and it ceased until the 2nd year of the reign of Darius, king of Persia." So we get all this progress, and then we get this just stop in the work, and that takes us to Ezra chapter 5, which honestly is about 16 years later. While these people are frustrating them, stopping everything, the people really aren't doing what they plan to do in the beginning. You want to read the first 2 verses of chapter 5?
It says, when the prophets Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddo prophesied to the Jews who were in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel who was over them, then Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel and Jeshua the son of Jozadak arose and began to rebuild the house of God, which is in Jerusalem, and the prophets of God were with them, supporting them.
So you open up Ezra, like you don't even read about Ezra. You read about Zerubbabel. You need to know, Jeremiah. You need to have flashbacks probably to Daniel and Isaiah. And then you kind of have to know Haggai and Zechariah, which most people probably are a little less familiar than what their message was versus maybe Jeremiah's message or who Daniel was. So it would behoove people. Haggai is really short. You can read that really fast. Zechariah a little bit longer, has some kind of weird visions in there, but talks a lot about the temple. I haven't read it recently, but I even think it talks about a temple where there's going to be no walls. And so it's kind of interesting that Nehemiah follows that with walls. It's like trying to make sense. What is this fulfilling what God has commanded? But essentially, Haggai, if you're going to boil it down, he says you need to get your priorities straight. You've been scared. You're worried about economic prosperity more than God and his glory. And that's why actually your crops haven't been good. It's why life has gotten harder. Planting has not gone well. Harvesting's been terrible. Focus on what's important. Worship and serve God. And then Zechariah is more about this future. This new Jerusalem is going to be amazing, which is, you read it, it's very encouraging, but I can see it also being very confusing. You're reading that, or they're prophesying to you, and you're like, man, let's build this new Jerusalem right now. The king's coming, and it's like not there in your lifetime, but you're hearing all about it. So anyway, we can look in verse 3 through verse 5, and we can see, what's the response by the people to Haggai and Zechariah.
I'm going to read those?
Go for it.
I know why you have me read all this. At that time, Tattenai, the governor of the province beyond the river, and Shethar-bozenai and their colleagues came to them and spoke to them thus, "Who issued you a decree to rebuild this temple and finish this structure?" Then we told them accordingly what the names of the men who were reconstructing this building. But the eye of their God was on the elders of the Jews, and they did not stop them until a report could come from Darius, and then a written reply be returned concerning it. Sorry.
So we meet this guy, this governor, Tattenai, or whatever his name is. Right now, just like an official, checking in. It's been 15 or 16 years, maybe a new guy, making sure everything's like on the up and up. He writes a letter to King Darius in verses 6 through 17. He kind of recaps everything, saying, did King Cyrus actually make this decree? Because that's what the Jews are saying is going on. Can they build? We want to make sure everything's on the up and up. Ezra 6, 1 through 12 tells us that, they got word back. Cyrus did in fact give them permission. The Jews are good to continue. But not only that, another pretty amazing thing, it seems like the Persian government's going to pay for the building of this temple. They're going to help out. They're going to give animals so they can sacrifice to Yahweh with severe sanctions and consequences. Anyone who gets in your way, you tell me, and bad things are going to happen to them. If you actually
take a log out of their house, impale it, and then their house should be a dung heap after that.
That's like amazing that a Persian king is saying, you get in the way, there'll be no memory of like your house. Don't get in the way. So again, in verse 11, we read, he says, if I make a decree that anyone alters his edict, it could be pulled out like you said. You can read, is Darius a good guy? Maybe he is, maybe it's not. Maybe he just wants Yahweh to, have favor on him with the midst of these other gods too. You can probably read something like that into it. And then we get to verse 13 through 18, and we see the temple finished and dedicated. I'll take a stab at reading. I'll start in verses 14 and I'll go through verse 18. It says, "And the elders of the Jews built and prospered through the prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddo. And they finished their building by the decree of God of Israel, by the decree of Cyrus and Darius and Artaxerxes king of Persia. And this house was finished on the 3rd day of the month of Adar in the 6th year of the reign of Darius the king. And the people of Israel, the priests and the Levites and the rest of the returned exiles celebrated the dedication of this house with joy. They offered at the dedication of this house of God 100 bulls, 200 rams, 400 lambs, and as a sin offering for all Israel, 12 male goats, according to the number of the tribes of Israel. And they set the priests in their divisions and the Levites in their divisions for the service of God at Jerusalem, as it is written in the book of Moses." Notice how I did not give me any hard names to read.
You skipped 13. And you're like, I'll pick up at 14. So I was just putting dots together.
Yeah.
So back in chapter 3, when we were reading, when they were crying and alternately praising, and you couldn't tell the difference.
Yes.
That was just the foundation.
Just the foundation.
Not the whole structure.
Not everything.
Yeah. So I'm guessing that by that, the foundation was smaller than
they're comparing
Solomon's.
it to Solomon. They're like, this is not going to be pretty. Like, this is cool, but man, this is kind of a shame.
And so then here we have the completion of the temple, and we do have all the sacrifices, but we still don't have a record of the Lord like descending on it
in an amazing way.
Like when Solomon does it, like the whole fills with smoke and stuff. Yeah.
And after this, they kind of jump into Passover. They've kind of been celebrating these feasts again. Probably another allusion to, Exodus 12. Coming out and Passover's instituted and all these things. So a summary of chapter 6: as they finished the temple, they dedicated, they celebrated Passover. So Ezra 1 through 6, to recap a little bit, it's about 20 years length in total, with a huge gap in the middle due to this opposition. And, a lot kind of baked in between God's sovereignty, between all these prophets prophesying, all these fulfillments. And, we haven't talked about Ezra or Nehemiah yet, just Zerubbabel. So there's a lot kind of packed in that first movements.
Yeah, and this is the temple that Herod will eventually not rebuild, add on and make better.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So you start talking more about that Second Temple period. Yeah. Where I think that's good. Great. Any closing thoughts on Ezra 1 through 6?
I think that what we'll see here, what we saw here, and what we'll see in the second and third movements is this idea of God letting people know, this is not what I had. Like, this is not the end. This is not. Like, don't get your hopes set up in this. We're not trying to remake. You couldn't do it under Moses and David. You're not going to do it on your own. You need something different. This is. So it's almost like he's like, this is not it.
I think he nailed it, and it's like over and over and over. I feel like the more you read the Bible, it's like, I've heard this before in a different story, in a different place, but it's like the same beats.
Don't put your hope here.
Yeah. And we need to hear that through
Seek
different
first
stories.
the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and then all these things will be added to you.
I like it. I've heard that before. Someone important said that. That's Ezra 1 through 6. Go ahead, read Zechariah, read Haggai, and then join us for episode 3. We'll continue on in Ezra.
That's our take.
Thanks for listening to Take 2. Find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube for those who want to watch our videocast.